Chapter 5, Retraumatization and Relationship Patterns. Quote, I wish I could be attracted to nice guys. I was in a relationship with a nice guy last year, but I found him so annoying. He was always touching me and wanting to talk. I think I even turned him into a bastard. Why do I do this? End quote. Shelley. People who experienced historical trauma had childhood relationships and experiences which were frightening, confusing, or inadequate. Experiences where core needs for safety, love, self-esteem, or self-expression were not met properly. These childhood experiences were painful. If painful experiences were simply something which happened in childhood, then historical trauma would not be the problem that it is. If these individuals grew into their young adult years with a positive self-concept and created healthy relationships, the wounds of the past would stand a better chance of healing. Sadly, this is not what usually happens. The term retraumatization captures the tragic reality that childhood pain seems to find a way of continuing into adulthood. This chapter is consistent with an idea we have mentioned more than once. We want the traumas of your past to have as little control over you and your life as possible. This chapter will help you explore how retraumatization and relationship patterns are relevant for you, and whether you can exert some control concerning these issues. Retraumatization. Retraumatization refers to the finding that people who experienced childhood harm are at substantially more risk of experiencing traumatic events as adults than those who did not have such childhood experiences. The evidence for retraumatization is supported by considerable research. Retraumatization is normally discussed in terms of repeated harm occurring within adult relationships. However, retraumatization can also occur through one's thoughts and behaviors, which is important to consider. Perhaps the simplest way to understand retraumatization is to point out that it involves emotional states which just seem to reoccur. During childhood, an individual may have felt frightened, distressed, humiliated, lonely, or bad about themselves. In adulthood, the context may be different, but this individual discovers that they continue to experience similar emotional, cognitive, and behavioral patterns. While we use the word retraumatization throughout this chapter, the term traumatic reenactment has a very similar meaning. Below, we explore how retraumatization seems to happen. Retraumatization through relationships, and an idea from 1914. The ideas of psychoanalysis have permeated popular culture to such an extent that it's difficult not to come across them in movies, TV, radio, or everyday conversation. While some psychoanalytic ideas have fallen out of favor with the passing of time, there is certainly one idea that has had remarkable staying power. It's an idea first mentioned by Sigmund Freud in 1914, and for some people, it can help explain quite a bit. This idea is referred to as the repetition compulsion, and it serves as one way of explaining how retraumatization occurs. The repetition compulsion refers to the idea that we have a need to create circumstances in our adult life which are similar to those we experienced in childhood. We don't do this by conscious design, but it tends to occur anyway. As adults, we tend to end up in relationships that mirror the relationships we had when we were children. Furthermore, this may not occur only once in adulthood. It may be recognized as a pattern. If others hurt me as a child, I might end up in adult relationships with people who frighten or hurt me. If people ignored me or didn't care about me, I might find I end up in adult relationships with people who are selfish or incapable of caring for others. If I was always expected to put my needs last and care for others as a child, I might end up doing the same thing in my adult relationships. If I was abandoned, perhaps I get left by people, or I end relationships suddenly. If I felt lonely in my childhood, perhaps I have ways of recreating this as well. Claudine experienced significant childhood neglect and periods of abandonment, and had a history of choosing relationships with men who mistreated or left her. She was making a lot of insight in therapy and had established a good relationship with a man who treated her well and was committed to her. Then, one night she got drunk at a pub and had sex with a man she met. She was confused and distraught over her behavior. Quote, I just don't know why I did it. I wasn't even attracted to the guy, really. I know I was drunk, but that doesn't really explain it. I've made such a mess of things. End quote. Claudine was able to make sense of her behavior through the lens of retraumatization. Whether in childhood or as an adult, all she had known was insecure relationships, where you might get hurt and where abandonment was likely. She knew that her partner was what she needed, but at some level she found it uncomfortable and hard to trust. Being drunk may have played a role in her one-night stand, but she was creating insecurity and risk within her relationship, an experience she knew only too well. Claudine's behavior is a good example of how retraumatization is often driven by unconscious forces. She hadn't consciously decided to undermine the security of her new partnership, but her behavior had done just that. Fortunately, she was able to be honest with her partner, and despite a difficult period, the damage was eventually repaired and trust renewed. Fear and excitement can go hand in healthy ways, as when you go on a roller coaster or take some calculated risk in sport. But for some who experienced childhood abuse or neglect, fear and excitement get tied together in unhealthy ways. These individuals might feel excitement or enthusiasm when taking risks, which can land them right back where they were as a child, scared, alone, humiliated, hurt, etc. They might also feel bored or frustrated when they have milder experiences, which offer security and contentment. Just the places or situation a person ends up in can invite trauma to happen all over again. Being inebriated in precarious settings can expose a person to harm by others. Some people end up in prison, where retraumatization by others is likely. Others may end up in prostitution, creating circumstances mirroring earlier sexual and physical abuse. Whatever the context, retraumatization rarely happens once or by conscious design. Retraumatization through your thoughts. Physical, sexual, or emotional abuse sends a message to a child that they are bad, shameful, or defective. As discussed previously, children can absorb these messages. The people who originally hurt you may not be around today to continue to send these messages, but they don't need to be. Many people who experienced childhood harm can take on the role of beating themselves with their own thoughts and mental images. It is possible to keep trauma active via your thought processes. Donald was emotionally abused by both parents throughout childhood. His capacity for self-denigration in response to even small mistakes was quite extraordinary. Donald drove a bus, and while hanging out with 3 female colleagues in a staff room, he made a joke which contained a mild reference to female stereotypes. The women didn't laugh, and Donald spent the next 3 days punishing himself for the imagined offense. Quote, I'm rubbish, they hate me, I'm so stupid, they probably don't want to work with me anymore, end quote, and so on. More than just verbal thoughts, he kept visualizing and imagining the scene, the joke and his female colleagues. He hardly slept. When he explained the self-denigrating nature of his thoughts in therapy, his clinician said, "So all these horrible things you have been saying to yourself, who does that sound like from your childhood?" He smiled in recognition. "Yeah," he said, "that's how my mom and dad used to talk to me." Donald no longer spent time with his parents, but he could take on the role of his parents and create the same horrible feelings through how he talks to himself. Though unaware that it was happening, Donald was re-traumatizing himself through his own thoughts and images. For many people who experience childhood harm, there is often a trauma drama happening inside their heads. By using the word drama, we are in no way suggesting that what is occurring is trivial, and we are certainly not suggesting that such individuals are being dramatic. But these recurrent thoughts and images are a drama in that they contain characters, plots, and powerful emotions like anger, fear, guilt, and shame. Even though the drama is being played out in the form of thoughts or images, it certainly feels real and can have a profound effect on a person's life, e.g., stopping them from being able to concentrate or sleep. If a child is being hit, shouted at, or sexually abused, trauma is happening through actual life events which are deeply disturbing. As adults, such individuals are more likely to experience mental events which are also disturbing, and this is one way in which trauma keeps occurring. That's what retraumatization that's what retraumatization means. Trauma is happening again. Individuals who experience childhood harm can also encounter distressing, intrusive thoughts or images. This is a feature of post-traumatic difficulties, which we look at in more detail in a future chapter. It's worth saying that memories of what happened that are intrusive and distressing are another way that retraumatization is happening through our thoughts. Retraumatization through behavior. Through their behaviors, people who experienced childhood harm can keep traumatic experiences going within adulthood. There are many ways this can occur, including 1. Using deliberate self-harm, e.g., cutting, burning, punching walls, etc. 2. Harming yourself through poor self-care, e.g., not looking after your body. 3. Harm inflicted through drugs or alcohol. 4. Harm occurring through a poor relationship to food or eating. 5. Behaviors which just tend to lead to injury. 6. Reckless financial decisions. 7. Criminal behavior or prostitution. 8. Getting into fights or being in situations where they are likely. Exercise 1. How does retraumatization happen for you, either past or present? Please pause the audio and complete exercise 1 in the guidebook. Traumatic bonding. We've explored 3 ways through which retraumatization can happen, but we haven't really looked at why it happens. Why do we keep ending up feeling the way we used to feel when we were a child? It doesn't seem rational, does it? If you were scared, unsafe, felt bad about yourself, or were ignored, why would this keep happening now that you are an adult? Traumatic bonding is one way of making sense of this. The term traumatic bonding, or trauma bonding, was first used by Patrick Carnes in his book, The Betrayal Bond. Humans have a powerful desire to bond with others to meet needs for safety, social belonging, and self-esteem. As an infant and child, it is essential to bond with those who are meant to care for us. Being unable to bond with these carers could mean the difference between life and death. But what if the person who should be caring for and protecting us is neglecting or hurting us? A child is likely to still feel a powerful need to bond with this person, despite the fear of harm or rejection. Furthermore, it can be the case that an abusive adult will alternate affection or attention with abuse and rejection, which is confusing for a child. A young child may continue to seek the attention and affection they need in the context of rejection and abuse. As a child enters their teen years, some may experience anger or hatred mixed with a continued need for acceptance and love. So, what exactly is a traumatic bond? It means that a child or adult experiences a contradictory desire to be close to and accepted by someone who, at least part of the time, is hurting or rejecting them. There is a bond, but the quality of the relationship is traumatic. Trauma plus bond equals a traumatic bond. Traumatic bonding is one of the reasons why people we work with feel guilty or disloyal for even speaking about what happened to them as a child. Van der Kolk captures the quality of traumatic bonding vividly in describing his clinical work with children. Quote, I have never met a child below the age of 10 who was tortured at home, who had broken bones or burned skin to show for it, who, if given the option, would not have chosen to stay with his or her family rather than being placed in a foster home. Of course, clinging to one's abuser is not exclusive to childhood. End quote. Traumatic bonding in childhood helps to explain why many are vulnerable to re-traumatization in adult relationships. As a child, the need for love and acceptance got tied up with pain and rejection, which of course is the basis for a traumatic bond. This pattern of love and pain being bound together is then more likely to repeat itself in adult relationships, i.e., the compulsion to repeat. So, having traumatic bonds in childhood simply makes having traumatic bonds more likely within adult relationships. We often hear the voice of a traumatic bond when speaking with people who experienced childhood harm. It can sound like Marcia, who was physically and emotionally abused by her father, and then continued to be abused by a string of male partners in adulthood. Discussing her current relationship, she tells us, quote, I know it's not right that he shouts at me and takes money off me. I'm not an idiot, but it's not always like that. I know I should leave him, but I love him. End quote. I know I should leave him, but I love him. Marcia feels a strong bond with someone who is hurting her, which is just what she experienced in childhood. Traumatic bonding in childhood relationships can prepare the ground for traumatic bonding in adult relationships. Adults will often accept a relationship characterized by a traumatic bond today because it's what they saw as normal in childhood. Recall that we said retraumatization means that the painful patterns that happened in childhood find a way of repeating. Traumatic bonding in childhood can encourage traumatic bonding as an adult. So, it's another way of explaining retraumatization. Exercise 2. Traumatic bonding. Did traumatic bonding occur for you in childhood? i.e., did you want acceptance and care from someone who was rejecting or hurting you? Have you noticed a traumatic bond in adulthood, i.e., someone you had strong feelings for who was hurting, ignoring, or rejecting you? Please pause the audio and complete exercise 2 in the guidebook. Chemistry and compatibility. Jeffrey Young and Janet Klosko made a fascinating observation about childhood trauma, chemistry, and compatibility. It's an observation that seems closely related to traumatic bonding. They suggest that people who were abused or neglected in childhood can feel chemistry when they meet the sort of person who might hurt or neglect them as an adult. For example, If we are physically abused in childhood, we might feel chemistry if we meet someone who seems a bit dangerous. If neglected, we might feel chemistry towards someone who seems self-contained and aloof. In other words, we can feel attraction for someone who, on an unconscious level, triggers memories of past trauma. To our knowledge, there is no research which demonstrates this is true, but it is certainly a phenomenon we have observed many times. Jung and Klosko's point is that chemistry is not the same as compatibility. Particularly for those who experienced childhood trauma, we can be attracted to the wrong people. Of course, we need to feel some chemistry, but chemistry needs to coexist with compatibility, and this means we need to be with someone who will not evoke the old awful emotions we experienced as a child. Compatibility means, among other things, being with someone who will not re-traumatize us. Further ways of understanding why re-traumatization occurs. There are other ways of making sense of re-traumatization. They all overlap with and help to explain trauma bonding and are worth exploring. It's what I'm comfortable with. Strangely, people who experience childhood harm can be more comfortable with what is painful than what might be otherwise. When we experience something hundreds or thousands of times, it can just seem like the way things are, and to experience it another way feels wrong. Quick exercise 3. Folding your arms. Fold your arms as you normally do. Keep them folded for a few moments to get a sense of what this feels like. When you've done this for a little while, unfold your arms. Now, we would like you to fold your arms again, but fold them the other way around, i.e., if your right hand is normally over your left arm, do it so your left hand is over your right arm. Keep your arms folded for at least 30 seconds to see how it feels. Please pause the audio and give this a try. What was that like? Most people discover two things. One, folding your arms the other way around was something you had to think about and expend effort to do. Second, it didn't feel natural or comfortable. The fact that you have folded your arms in a particular way on thousands of occasions means that doing it differently is hard, unnatural, and feels uncomfortable. This experience is neurological. Your brain and body have coordinated folding your arms so many times that there are well-trodden neurological pathways which make this habit simple and easy. To do otherwise is asking a lot of your brain and body. There is even evidence that a frightened animal will leave pleasant circumstances and return home, even if the circumstances at home are very unpleasant. In one study, animals such as mice were raised in circumstances which were loud and where food was scarce. They were then allowed to go to pleasant circumstances with plenty of food. If you introduce a loud noise, they will run home, a place which is loud and has little food. The study suggests that in times of stress, mammals return to what is familiar, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it means returning to a bad situation. What if a child is told thousands of times, in one way or another, that they are useless? What if a child is physically or sexually abused on numerous occasions? And what if there is also an absence of experiences characterized by safety, nurturance, affection, and positive messages? As an adult, these individuals may be more comfortable with mistreatment and less comfortable with trust, intimacy, affection, etc. Marianne was physically and emotionally abused by her parents. She entered therapy because she was having difficulty being affectionate with her newborn daughter, which was disturbing for her. Quote, I don't really like being touched. If my husband or other people try to hug me, my skin sort of crawls. I can enjoy sex, but just the sex part. I don't like it when it becomes intimate or emotional." End quote. A consequence of childhood abuse meant that Mary Ann felt more comfortable when people didn't touch or were intimate with her, but at a deeper level, Mary Ann still has the same need for affection and intimacy as everyone else. She is uncomfortable with what she needs. For Mary Ann, part of overcoming the consequences of childhood abuse is about learning to be comfortable with physical affection and intimacy, learning to trust it. For Mary Ann, learning to accept affection is like becoming comfortable folding her arms the other way around. Brandon had been physically and emotionally abused by his mother and bullied at school. When we knew him, he was socially isolated. Quote, "I only go out once a week to go shopping, and otherwise I don't see anybody. I mean, I don't have friends or family I hang out with, but I read a lot of books, and I follow the news every day. I'm happy with my own company." End quote. Brandon is clinically depressed and suffers with insomnia and nightmares. To be frank, Brandon is not really happy with much of anything. We are not convinced by the idea that Brandon is, quote, "happy with his own company," end quote. When Brandon says, quote, "I'm happy with my own company," end quote, what we are really hearing is, "I'm very uncomfortable being around other people." Brandon is uncomfortable with something which is a natural human need. It's what I expect. Circus troops discovered many years ago that you could train baby elephants to stay put simply by using ordinary rope or light chain to fix them to a stake. The baby elephants will try to break the rope or chains, but after some frustration or anger, they accept that they are just not strong enough. As full-grown elephants, they could certainly break away from a normal rope or light chain, but it doesn't occur to them to try, as they have come to accept the situation. This is apparently good news for traveling circus troops, because they don't need to carry around heavy rope or chains. Human beings are incredible regarding their capacity for abstract thought and the richness with which they can communicate with one another. But in certain ways, human beings share much with other mammals, including how we often accept something today because it's what happened in the past. People who experience childhood harm are just like everyone else in this respect, but what makes them different are their past experiences. People who are loved and safe within their childhood relationships expect love and safety. And if they are frightened or hurt as an adult, they will experience this as shocking and unacceptable. If this happens, many such individuals will get out of that relationship fast and put an end to the trauma because it's not what they expect to happen. But if a person is physically or emotionally abused as a child, and it starts to happen in an adult relationship, they may think, okay, this is what happens in relationships. It's awful, but that's relationships. So they may stay, and the hurt continues. In this way, they are more vulnerable to retraumatization. It's what I deserve. Molly's case is extreme, but it serves as a powerful example of how childhood trauma can damage self-concept and lead to further trauma in adulthood. Molly was emotionally abused and neglected by her mother, a woman who was a heroin addict and prostitute. She never knew her biological father and was exposed to dangerous situations due to a string of Johns her mother had contact with. She was unsafe and unloved. As a young woman, she developed a masochistic sexuality and only seemed to be attracted to men who would hurt her physically and demean her emotionally. When we began working with her, she was a member of a group of people who practiced sadomasochistic sexuality, and she was popular within this group. These sadomasochistic experiences gave her a role and allowed her to have some relationships, but her contact with the group inevitably fueled her self-loathing. Quote, I try not to let these guys know I'm available, and I can keep that up for maybe a week, but I can feel so distressed and lonely, and then I will just send out a text to a few of them. One of them will be around within an hour. Afterwards, I just feel calmer for a day or so, but it's a trap, because I also feel awful about what I'd let them do to me. End quote. When you ask Molly what it would be like to have a relationship with a man who didn't hurt or demean her, she will tell you she's just not attracted to that sort of man. Occasionally, she would even try to convince her therapist that sadomasochism is a lifestyle choice and that it's not necessarily unhealthy. But when you explore this deeper, Molly can acknowledge that there is more to it. She appreciates that her sense of self was so damaged in childhood that she doesn't feel she deserves to be treated with affection or love. Her difficulty believing that she deserves to be cared for properly traps her in a cycle of retraumatization. Exercise 4. Other explanations for retraumatization. Please pause the audio and complete Exercise 4 in the guidebook. Retraumatizing versus reparative relationships. Retraumatizing relationships are adult relationships which keep trauma going. If you were frightened, hurt, ignored, or humiliated in childhood, this is retraumatizing. If you are having a relationship as an adult and the relationship regularly elicits some or all of these old feelings, this is a retraumatizing relationship. Reparative relationships are often a very important part of an individual's recovery. These are relationships which serve to repair at least some of the original harm. People who experience childhood harm are fortunate when they can have a reparative relationship which is sustained over time, and it is not unusual for us to work with adults who have not, as yet, had a reparative relationships. Reparative relationships come in many forms: partnerships, friendships, family members, and even pets. Creating or allowing reparative relationships to occur in adulthood seems like an obvious thing to do. However, for many people we work with, this may not be obvious at all. Some have only known relationships characterized by neglect or threat. So why would they imagine reparative relationships can happen? And when there is an opportunity for a reparative relationship to develop, many don't trust what is on offer or feel uncomfortable. As a result, some people may avoid or push away people who could potentially offer them a reparative relationship. We will come back to the need for reparative relationships in more detail in a later chapter. Getting control of retraumatization. This chapter has looked at 3 ways trauma can be kept going. Trauma can continue to be experienced through 1. A repeated pattern of painful relationships in which needs for safety, love, acceptance, and esteem get frustrated. 2. Thoughts and images which drive feelings like fear, shame, stuck anger, or inappropriate guilt. 3. Behaviors which leave us with bad feelings or physical sensations. Emotional or physical pain was bad enough during childhood. Having to carry on with psychological pain in adulthood adds insult to injury. We believe many people can limit the impact of re-traumatization in ways which make a real difference. But it's also important to be realistic. The roots of childhood trauma run deep. Impulses to think and act in ways that invite re-traumatization represent habits that do not wish to go away on their own. There are no simple or magical solutions, and we are not fond of approaches that suggest there are. However, below are some ideas about how you can end, or at least minimize, retraumatization. Protecting yourself from unhealthy relationships. A simple way to understand if a relationship is healthy is to reflect on how you typically feel during and after you spend time with someone. Do you feel safe? And do you feel good about yourself? Do you have more positive feelings about life? Or do you feel afraid, exhausted, or angry? If there is chemistry in a relationship, but the experience is typically painful, this is worrying. Whatever the event, if you recognize that you are in a relationship that mirrors painful childhood relationships, there are a few ways forward. Either 1, the relationship can somehow get repaired or improved, or 2, you need to get out of the relationship. If the relationship can't be repaired or improved, but you feel you can't end it, as is sometimes the case with family members, then it may be a matter of 3, protecting yourself by creating boundaries or limiting contact. If you were neglected and felt alone in childhood, it's possible that what is repeating are feelings of isolation. This is a more subtle form of the compulsion to repeat, or retraumatization, but it can be just as relevant. The challenge in this instance isn't repairing or ending unhealthy relationships, but finding the confidence to develop healthy relationships. If the above information seems simplistic, or you need more support with this area, there is an entire chapter concerning relationships later on, and we will return to these ideas in more detail. Managing retraumatization occurring through your thoughts. Obsessing on events in ways that drive painful feelings and disturbing physical states can be a form of retraumatization. We offered the example of Donald, who told a joke to female colleagues that misfired and then experienced a stream of thoughts and images which frightened him. The way to deal with retraumatization through your thoughts and images is both simple and difficult. If you find that you have powerful thoughts and images which are out of proportion to current triggers and represent past abuse, you just need to recognize what is happening. Let it go and soothe yourself. Perhaps you can find words such as, "The thoughts I'm having about this are driving anger or fear in ways which are out of proportion and are just hurting me. I got traumatized in the past. This situation is different. I need to keep this in proportion." In practice, it's often very difficult to do this because anger or fear can be powerful, and the threat or slight you experienced can seem momentous. Putting an end to retraumatization, which occurs through your thoughts, can be a powerful means of addressing past abuse, but it can be a difficult task for some people because these thoughts can be very insistent and hard to challenge. If distressing yourself through your thoughts is really difficult for you, there are a few chapters later on which will be particularly helpful concerning this area. Managing retraumatization through self-care. We mentioned that some people who experienced childhood harm re-traumatize themselves through their behaviors, and that this is often an unconscious process. They were hurt, demeaned, ignored, scared, or told they were a failure in childhood. Today, these individuals may act in ways or put themselves in situations which make it likely they will continue to experience these feelings all over again, though in some new context. Self-harm, dangerous behaviors, criminal activity, substance abuse, not caring for your body properly, poor nutrition, starting fights, sabotaging relationships, self-isolation, addictive behaviors, and so on. If you recognize any of these patterns, self-care is a way to help yourself. What constitutes self-care can be different for everyone who re-traumatizes themselves through their behavior. Marjorie is a young woman who was emotionally abused by a stepmother and sexually abused by a babysitter. Quote, "When Robert, her partner, doesn't call me, I can feel so angry and scared, and horrible thoughts go around in my head. That's when I usually cut myself. But I know that if I call Janet, a friend, she will come over and we can go and get a drink, and I can get through it." End quote. Calling her friend was a means of self-care Marjorie found helpful. How trauma keeps going and what represents good self-care for you will be unique. Nurturing self-care is anything you can do which leaves you feeling better about yourself or life. Self-care will get more attention in a later chapter. Exercise 5. Journaling opportunity. Getting control of retraumatization. People who experience childhood harm can get control over retraumatization in at least 3 ways. 1. Protecting yourself from unhealthy relationships. 2. Noticing thoughts and images which are re-traumatizing you, letting them go, and self-soothing. 3. Recognizing when you are re-traumatizing yourself through behavior and coping through better self-care. But these are generic ideas. How they apply to you is unique. Below is an opportunity to explore specific ways in which you want to get in control of re-traumatization. Please pause the audio and complete exercise 5. This also concludes the chapter on re-traumatization and relationship patterns.